We have to get this enemy defeated. World News Tonight anchor David Muir joins us now live from Arizona. So, David, that answer at the end, the president saying, "I love you" to those families of the more than 70,000 Americans killed by this virus. How would you describe his mood tonight?
Well, listen, I would have to say it was quite striking sitting there in that room at the factory when he talked with that tone about the families who've lost loved ones in this pandemic. You know, most Americans, I think, have become very familiar with those daily presidential briefings at the White House, often with members of the coronavirus task force behind the president. They're often combative with the press corps. The president has long said he doesn't believe the media is fair when it comes to coverage of him. You're well aware of that, Lindsay. And so when I asked him what his message would be for the president to say it keeps him up at night, that there's no way to replace these family members who've been lost, and that he sends them his love. It was profound from this president, particularly in this time that has become so polarized, so political, particularly when you watch the president in all of those other forums, the briefings that have been playing out at the White House for weeks.
Right. And as we just heard, President Trump told you that there may be more deaths as states reopen, but we have to get back to work. Is there any indication that he has a plan in case cases surge once again after the states reopen?
You know, it's interesting, Lindsay. I asked him about what we heard from Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York today, who talked about this all coming down to what he said is the value of one human life. And Governor Cuomo has long talked about using the valve analogy, saying if we slowly reopen and we start to see hospitalization rates go up, death rates go up, all of those indicators, Governor Cuomo indicated that that's when you have to shut the valve down. You have to pull it back. And I presented that to the president tonight. He was unaware of what Governor Cuomo had said today, but this was another difference in tone in this interview. He seemed open to it. He said, I want to read what the governor has said before I weigh in on that. But as you know, Lindsay, the reality on the ground as you travel the country, and so few of us have been able to, this is sort of an extraordinary moment to be out of the studio and here in Phoenix covering the president today. But when you travel around the country and you hear from these governors in a lot of these states who want to reopen, they sense the anxiety from Americans who want to go back to work but who are worried about their health. A lot of these governors are taking action, as you know, Lindsay, even as the number of cases in their own state have not leveled off, which of course leads to the next question for the president, which is, you know, why haven't these governors followed your own guidelines? But make no mistake, his trip here to Phoenix was to signal to the country that, at least in his opinion, this country is ready, at least in part, to start reopening.
And David, there was that moment also when the president held out that paper after you pushed him on what he said at the beginning of the year on the limited number of cases in the early days. The election now 6 months away. This was his first trip away from the White House in 2 months and to a swing state. Do you get the sense that he believes his administration could have done a better job? And did he give you any indication of how he might campaign?
You know, it's interesting, Lindsay. He certainly didn't say that they haven't done a good job. In fact, he said the opposite. He said, I should get credit, even though I don't. I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially his message tonight, his response to the pandemic. But you have to understand when he talks in those terms about loving the people who've been lost and sending a message to their families, that he understands the toll in this country and that he's the president. He's presiding over this. You know, even for as political and as polarized as things have become, there are few who are blaming him for the actual pandemic itself. There are lots of questions, as you point out, Lindsay, about the response. And the question you're talking about in particular was one that I just asked him about, something he had said at the end of February. Remember, he had closed down travel from China the end of January. It was the end of February when he talked about 15 cases in the U.S. and when they go away, we'll be down to 0. And this will have been a very good job. And I just wanted to know, it wasn't at all a gotcha moment. I just wanted to know what was playing out in his head at that moment, and how does the administration explain the disparity between 15 cases and then going away to more than 1 million cases, as we all know, here in America tonight. And the argument the president tried to make with me tonight is showing me the increase in testing, pointing to the tests that we've become so successful at it that it now reflects much higher numbers. That's when I went back at him and said, but you have to understand that that is a huge disparity between 15 and more than 1 million. So perhaps we will see that on the campaign trail as one of his his explanations for the action taken or inaction, as some look at it early on. But he feels very confident that his administration has been rising to the challenge here. And I will not be surprised to see if he continues to try to make that case in these final 6 months. And as you point out, Lindsay, a student of politics yourself, it is no surprise he chose Arizona to come to tonight.
Really insightful and necessary questions, David. Thank you so much for that reporting.